So for the first question that I wanted to ask you is, how did you start in the cannabis business?
An interesting question that has lots of layers to it. So I'll give the one that I think is easiest to talk about in this context. I also run a couple of other veterinary related businesses in the US, particularly state of Colorado. And when I first got into cannabis as a medicine, as an industry, trying to figure out what on earth is going on with this cannabis scenario, we were actually also running a co-working community. So in the US, what that means is when you have a lot of professionals that are doing the same type of work, you can often find ways to share resources. So you can share space, you can share a refrigerator, a centrifuge, a microscope. So we were running and still are, a co-working community specifically for mobile or house call based veterinary practitioners. So what this means is that our practitioners were tending to be in medicine that was focused on senior animals, palliative care, housebound animals, housebound pet parents. And so they were getting a lot of questions about cannabis from their clients. The clients themselves were wanting to use cannabis, already using cannabis, asking a lot of questions about it. But as practitioners, as so many of the people listening will know, there just wasn't that much information. It was about 5 years ago, so pretty early on in the change of Colorado or US cannabis policy. So everyone was trying to figure out, again, what's happening, what's going on here. And so our practitioners were very much in the same spot. Because I had the opportunity as the director of that co-working community to have some time and to research what cannabis was, it was actually very similar to what I was doing in a lot of other aspects. I would research which drugs we should carry as a community that worked for everybody, which equipment we should purchase so that everyone could use it. And so when everyone had the same question about what is cannabis, it was already a pretty easy thing for me to fall into and say, all right, I got the question. I will take on sort of researching that for us as a community and figure out what should we be doing? What do we need to know? What are the basics? So my dive into cannabis from that professional aspect really came from trying to conquer a question that was causing a lot of havoc among our community, among our practitioners. And then, as anyone who is beginning to work with cannabis knows, you dive into medicine and start learning about the science that is cutting edge. There's so much that we are learning about body systems, mammals' bodies, just because we're also curious in cannabis. Cannabis itself is the most interesting and exciting medicine I've ever explored in my entire career. So beginning to dive into it to help our practitioners and our community definitely turned into it being the practice that I wanted to pursue. And because cannabis has so much growth and so much change and so many things that are always on the move, it's sort of allowed me, but the business, veterinary cannabis that sprung out of it, to stay in that same position of consolidating information, getting out to practitioners now throughout the world, but what had started in Colorado, this information about cannabis. What do we do? How do we work with it? How do we keep our patients safe? So from my perspective, it has been an amazingly fun journey to answer a question to help our smaller community, but then be able to stay in that same position, just growing in terms of scope of who we're kind of mentoring and who we're giving that information to. So that was one aspect of the first bit of how I got into cannabis medicine.